I have an idea. Let us discuss the importance of the dimensions. Greetings, chromatic warriors! Now, some of you have been following along with me on Patreon, and you've seen my recent foray back into illustration, getting back into something that I used to do thanks to certain events, like contributing to the Death Wizard's rulebook, and also vending at an event. I'll have prints of my work available soon. But yeah, I've been spending a lot of late nights watching these illustration streams and just getting into fine art, studying the masters, and what I want to distill back into miniature painting. I love the way that all of these various art forms all feed into each other. But what I'm presenting today is the concept of focal points. You have, in the example of Frank Frazetta's artwork, you can see areas of intense detail and then areas with more release, more brush strokes. And just like many pieces of art, I think areas of tension and release are important. So, what can I learn from this? As I've been making jokes to myself about the tedium of painting the back of something and just greatly enjoying the total control of having, an entire scene to work with. And I think that's a big difference between miniature painting and two-dimensional work. You're creating the piece inside of the scene, inside of the fireball. I'll put that back down. But I've been enjoying seeing some brush strokes in my work, and I enjoy the tightness and tension of the focused detail. And I've seen this approach applied to miniature painting, but in light of recent events, it makes more sense to me. So, let's have a look. Okay, friends, first of all, I have the base coated with a mixture of gray castle and black, and now I'm going to lay down a mixture of gray castle and black, but this time there's more black involved. So my approach, I'm trying to do more with less, with more kind of intentional placements of brush strokes. First of all, though, I need to give everything a little bit of attention. So every area is going to be just kind of a dance of black and an overtone. Just a quick highlight. That's well enough. I'm trying to be quick about this. The idea is to kind of pull my punches back and create some intensely detailed focal areas to the point of them being so nice that you don't really start ignoring the looseness of the surrounding areas. The skin is going to be first base coated with a mixture of dragon red and dried brown. I'll be replicating the usual dark oath color scheme that I do, just based on a kind of a yellow and gray motif. Yeah, that fits, that's the right word. But hopefully after I gain my footing on this, I can continue to replicate this kind of painting approach. I think I'll create a new Warcry warband. I'm always going to be thinking about gaming when I'm painting a little bit. But you can see as I'm working along, just laying down a single layer of this color. I mean, thanks to the Fanatic pigment density, I'm getting a lot done with just a single coat of paint. But I'm also playing with the transparency that acrylics give us. This being applied over a black base coat is going to create a much darker color in what comes through this overcoat. And I'm applying my highlights, very loose and wide. The head is a good example here. You can kind of see the dome of the skull, a little bit of the brow bone. So I already have one coat of paint down there, just through increasing saturation. But look at the size of my brush and the amount of time that I've just taken to add that second pass. It's kind of nice working up from a dark base coat. I'm going to come in and take care of this pelt with some dried brown. Starting to get somewhere. I think the vision is becoming a little more clear. See, I'm leaving a lot of darkness. I'm going over everything vaguely before swooping in to sharpen it up. So just get a little bit of dried brown to start toning out this furry pelt. See, I'm going to almost just blending over it. We'll let some of the transparency and darkness take over. You see how I'm placing, dropping my first touchdown of paint up high. It's going to be much more saturated, and then dragging it down into sort of a tinted sheet over this deep area. See the area above it, how that's been drying. It creates a slight gradient, very fast and loose. So outside of the pelt, it's also mounted to a cloak. We'll render that as a very rough leather texture. So I have black and dried brown mixed together, laying that thin filter out over a deep primer coat. Oh yes, I love the spicy yellow. Pulling some fiendish yellow into play, laying this down over a base coat. Dried brown once again. That color's been going into many mixtures on this model. Let's get that quickly put together. Yellow is going to be a little rough. It's kind of a gritty color. I think I have to wet blend here. I'm creating more work for myself than is necessary. Trying to layer it up and cake it on like I did with the other colors, just with the kind of size of the yellow pigment grains as it runs across all ranges. A little wet blend is going to be the fastest way to the end. That's what I'm talking about. Now over this foundation, that wet blend. So raise things up a bit, but I'm going to keep my highlight portions very small. I want to let these gradients breathe. Just going to focus on the upper quarter of every surface. Let everything else just fall into the unmadeness. I also have some metallics to pick out, taking the same approach, just coming in here, trying to pick out all the raised areas, leaving black in the recesses, and I'm thinking I should have airbrushed this entirely black from the beginning. Leaving this much primer showing makes me feel weird, but I should be able to cover it with a wash. Learning as I go. This is a brand new idea I had. It was inspired by lessons with a student, so I must find out. It's true copper for those coppery areas, and gunmetal pulled in for the alternate metallics. Kind of mix and match as to your own liking. Lick the brush and sponge that up, blending with the metallic paint. But yeah, we'll keep everything kind of thin and wispy, fast and loose, like all of the other areas. Cracking right along. We'll work on this hair, and just like the yellow on the front, I want it to read overall as a much lighter object. So getting a brighter base coat in place. This is Castle Gray with a little bit of black and a little bit of dried brown. I know these mixtures might seem like madness, but a lot of things have just been taken from the Castle Gray and black mixtures, just variations of a warm gray, and then adding this or that. So really just a warm gray with one more color placed into it. I wanted to capture this bit as well. Same approach as the hair on his head. This will be a nice triangulation of color, but it is further down on the model, and I want to have much heavier shadows down there. So see, I'm just kind of going along with the texture of the fur, lifting my brush up, leaving a heavy black shadow down at the bottom. Oh ho ho ho! Now every piece of the model has been base coated in some way, some have a few highlights going for themselves. Time to start sharpening things up wisely, selectively. So first of all, let's take care of the hair. It's a very small amount of gray castle. Just picking out the upward peaks. See on the other boot how it's come together. Just painting along with that texture, showing my brush strokes, but they're curving away from the model and breaking off at just the right point. Let me highlight this hip with the same approach. I'm going to leave so much out of this. Just very small area of highlight. Pick out, it does have these wrappings around the leg. But yeah, you see how much shadow, like there's a completely unpainted area showing through right here. It's just very, very small selective highlights. And there are a lot of areas like in the old gray castle treatment, so let me take care of those. Just kind of finish my trip around with this color. Let's talk about that crispy leather. So I have some diluted down leather brown. How very appropriate. And again, playing with this is a very high jump compared to the shadow beneath this color. And the paint is diluted down, so I'm playing with that transparency. But I want to produce, a rough, cracked effect. So here on the back, you can see an area that's already dried. Let me apply some paint to this broad open spot. So the idea is to get this first layer laid down, sort of a transparent, patchy approach. I'm still acknowledging the zenithal light source, but yeah, you can see I'm kind of mixing things up so I get this tattered result. There it is. You can see it's very subdued once it's dry. So I've added a little gray castle into the mixture, and less is more with this layer. You can quickly overdo your leather texture, so first I would recommend just getting your edge highlights in place. You can see I'm giving them a split look, kind of lifting and dropping. Really want this to look chaotic and tattered. So just picking out the edges. Now let's create some long scratches. I want to concentrate on this brighter area, of course. And yeah, it's diluted down. You can see I'll lay it in place, and then after it dries, it really chills out. So just a few of those. Now let's go in the same way we were applying that leather brown. Add some kind of patchiness, a little kind of a accumulation of puddling paint. Yes, nailed it. Just really trying to sell that texture, and as it dries and overlaps, especially with that preceding layer, it really starts to come together quickly. It's kind of it's an illusion. Okay, decent. Let's go in, and I have dried brown and a little bit of dragon red. Felt like I don't know, I could just corral things a little bit more. Maybe my choice in tones was slightly off. I like how the technique comes out, but yeah, I like it a lot more glazing over some of these textures, creating smoother, warmer shadows. Yes, that's a nice look. Now as we continue to detail things out, let's get back to that pelt. First, I'm going in with dried brown. You can see I'm just kind of assisting that gradient by picking out some of the individual chunks of fur. And then on top of that, and leaving a great amount out, just concentrating on the upper kind of quarter of every gradient, and pulling some leather brown into play. Once again, on those raised areas, you can see how it's coming together to produce very defined chunks of fur. Following that, I'll keep things nice and simple, just adding white into that leather brown. even less this time. Now I'm starting to build up my spotlight, trying to zero things in around the model's face and collar area. Okay, so not too bad. I also need to give a lift to the leather. It's coming in again with that white and leather brown mixture, applying even smaller portions. Yeah, you see how this final highlight, this final jump up in brightness really clicks things together. It focuses your eye on some of those more subtle textures by laying this very prominent feature over them. Things kind of disassemble into the various levels of roughage. It's a good look for selling that leathery impression. And now just adding to my cracked leather progression, I have that white mixed with leather brown that I was using on the pelt. See, just picking out some of these edges, the same as before, a broken edge highlight, maybe adding a few kind of slashes leading off of the edges. Just crackling things up, texturizing them a little bit further, and it makes those previous intersecting layers of texture add up nicely as things become sharper and sharper to these kind of key highlights. Very nice. Wrapping things up on the loincloth, I've just once again added white into my previous color. So it's just white and fiendish yellow. Very, very sparing with the highlights. I want things to be leading up to the focus around the model's pectoral and face. Just very sharp jumps right here. I'll take some black and dried brown as well just to pick out these deeper holes. And just a small touch of fiendish yellow to pull out that kind of lower edge of these holes. Coming in hot for some skin highlights. I don't know why my microphone didn't record audio for this one clip and instead gave me screeching static. As usual, my usage with machines involves me doing absolutely nothing different to something existing in a solid state and it deciding it will change. So here I am voicing over this one segment of the tutorial I recorded. As you can tell, I'm very happy about that. So what I have is dried brown with a small touch of dragon red mixed into it, and now adding a little bit of gray castle into that mixture. You can see me pulling out the upward facing angles, just making everything look a little more robust. This is my first highlight really, as I've only laid down that variations of that first base tone. But here we are just pulling up the saturation, getting the general volumes before things proceed into more of the sharpened pinpoint highlights. So I'll just be moving around, working the saturation up with this mixture. I know it gets a little bit goofy, but having a three-part mixture, actually it's not goofy at all, and this is the proper way to work. And there are some areas where I don't want the same depth of shadow, like in the side of his head here, because I want this escalating brightness as we lead to that focal point. So just dropping back to that base coat, using that as a shadow tone in the brighter areas. Get a little bit in on the bicep. You saw me working on the side of the head. Yeah, just a very limited amount, just kind of raising the shadows in some key areas. Coming right along, I'm adding more of that gray castle into the mixture, as you can see, keeping a very kind of targeted, specific highlight in mind. I'm starting to greatly reduce the surface area that I was covering. You can see the very small portions that I'm focusing on. I'll let myself a little more loose on the face, making that be the brightest area of skin. Be sure to leave a little shade on the forehead. And now it's starting to come together. You can see that focal spotlight coming into play. It's such a delicate dance, back and forth. Making some small adjustments along the way. You're going to have to think about this a little bit when you're trying it for the first time, but it is not a time sink. I'm still doing less and less. Which paint job doesn't involve a little bit of stepping back and forth and adjusting? Now I've added white into that mixture, cover some very, very small areas, kind of pulling out specular highlight on the forehead. At this point, it's very important to consider the final resting spot, that optimal photographico angolo. So make sure the face has a lot of attention put into it, because that is where I want the focus to go. I want people to ignore the underpainted areas. And I suppose I'll bring just a small spot onto the upper bicep. And this is the challenge now, where normally you'd go and give everything a little touch of this near final highlight. Could be the final one for me. I'm just feeling it out as I go. But remember, less is more. It's very important to not overdo it. Don't overstretch things. Just concentrate on a few key areas and make sure those are detailed and saturated. I'd also like to take just the faintest amount of dragon red. Very, very faint. I kind of place it and soak most of it up on my brush. And slide some into the temple, along the cheek, just kind of pinkening out the side of the face. Goal here is to just add a little bit more of a lively, eye-catching flesh hue to my focal area. Okay, looking very nice. Before I get to my final touches, let me double back once again. The base is going to be a very quick wash of weathering powder, but it does have some very prominent shapes on it, so I'll go in and just quickly darken some of these areas. They will be significantly masked, but I do feel it needs a small amount of attention, just kind of pulling out these deep recesses, etc. I also have a small bone to pick. Well, whoop, whoop, whoop. Just a base coat of black and leather brown. It'll be covered in dust, but it does need some indication of what color it is. Quick leather brown on top of that. Small touch of white. While everything is still wet, doesn't have to be very clean. And it isn't. All right, with that little bit of housekeeping out of the way on the base, we'll jump back to that. I want to get some verdigris involved. Just diluted down. I'm a big fan of these effects from the Army Painter. And remember, you can enter a code at checkout to receive a discount on Army Painter products. I'll be sure to have that linked in the description because it is different for my supporters on Patreon. They get an additional level of discount. Yeah, very nice. Just letting gravity do the work. Do not over-apply this. Less is more, as that has been the motto through this whole process. And why not? I'm going to use some fresh rust as well. I don't usually add this to my Dark Oath Savagers, but a little bit around the rivets. I'm trying to be quick and cool, so this is a good way to pull some additional coloration into the picture. So let's go very slightly, just a very subtle indication. It's the round of finalization on top of all these metals that I've laid those effects on top of. I'm coming through with my brightest silver available, Mithril. And you can see I'm just picking out these edges, picking out every little rivet. It's kind of nice seeing how the rough, unsealed approach is coming together to form very detailed highlights. I like how things are becoming unmade as they recede into the shadows. It's a very painterly look. So all of the silver and all of the copper, it's all the same to me. They'll all get very sharp, pointy highlight by brightest silver. Let's do some finalizing. So first of all, I've got my black liner out, and if I so choose, I can bring some dark lines into play, specifically on these pom-poms on top of the boots. I want those to have a little bit more of a liney look to them. And there are some other areas, like maybe up in the fur pelt here, that could use a little more definition. I'm just basically going through and checking my work, deciding if something needs a dark line or not. I'm not terribly obsessive about my dark lining, but anywhere that would be obviously seen, it's been a lot of the approach here. I want to make those obvious areas look very sharp. I'm also going to come through with pure white. This just works for this paint job. Your final pure highlight can be any color you like. I may use something like worn stone or barren dune, but in this case the white is looking just right for me. Yeah, again, those kind of very specific targeted areas. I think just the face, just up on the head and the brows, a little bit on the cheek, just on the bicep. That's it for the skin. There are other areas that will receive a white highlight. I want this bit of bandolier that's showing. I want to kick that up. Small amounts of this pelt. I mean, I wouldn't say there's a lot of surfaces because of the spotlighting, but my spotlit area, all of those materials are going to be getting a little touch, a little tiny dot or slash to kind of maximize out on the contrast, really direct the viewer's eye. Here's a good example. Look at the loincloth. Coming in here with my final white, and I must resist just a pinch of a highlight. Yeah, see, I'm already like, instinct is drawing me back in. Let me just saturate this bright area. Let things breathe. Remember, Frank Frazetta. So, little up in that corner. All right. There's also a certain amount of transparency involved. Sometimes, just like with those earlier base coats, I'll go in with some dilution involved with the white. So I can lay down a highlight and know that it's going to chill out a little bit as it dries and desaturates on top of that dilution. Of course, the hair, very fair. This is kind of the trickiest part because I've found myself pretty much having to draw the hair right on. I wanted to go quickly, so I'm laying down these very specific, deliberate brush strokes. There wasn't so much blending involved. If you look around at the backside, you've got this things kind of coming together to a point of brightness as the hair bows out here. I kind of get away with mostly edge highlighting, but there's some areas like right here. I'm gonna have to kind of swoop down and swoop back out so I get a thin line leading up and a thin line leading off. That may require a little cleanup work. Sometimes I need my face a little closer than the camera to paint a nicely detailed surface. But this little lift on the hair is making a big difference. This is bringing a third color into play, so it now looks a lot more robust in its gradation. Time for some additional fun. This might be more of an optical illusion, but what I have here contained on my brush is a mixture of black and triumphant navy. So it's just this lovely purple tone, and I believe I can sweep this into the shadows, toning my shadows, giving them more of a cold hue instead of just dropping into the darkness. This should be mostly unnoticeable upon first view, but with an educated eye, you may notice the effect it's having. Actually know what you're looking at. Not everyone is going to see this. They may just see a combination of colors that pleases them, and they may not realize it's because of this subtle purple, kind of backing everyone up. See how I lay that into the shadow of this leg that's dropping backwards? It adds some additional depth just through the tone. But it's shadow work, so it's not going to be as noticeable. It falls away. It creates more focus on the important areas. So the same way that I've limited my highlights, having very, specific chosen shadow areas pulled into place. It all comes together nicely. Oh yay, purple shadows in place. Let's take a diluted mixture, yellow earth weathering powder. Just thin this down near 50-50, water and weathering powder. I'll give this an all-over coating on the base. A little bit goes a long way, just like you're applying a wash. Make sure you stretch that small bead out over as much of the surface as you can. It's going to look much different when it dries. It returns back up to its light powder form. Yeah, this is a nice quick way to get a unique effect, bring some different materials into your composition. Love some material variety. If it goes on too heavy in the end, you can also just brush it away with your paintbrush. Just absorb a little bit of this excess up off of the broad, flat surfaces. Neato. Interesting. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I had a good time putting that together, and already after painting that, I want to do it again. So many more ideas started coming to me. I think I'm presenting it in a way that is driven by shortcuts, and I don't know if that's really the case in the end. This is a decently long tutorial. It took me, I'd say total painting time on this model was probably like 2 hours. So it's a little bit of time, but it's also a lot of time. Happy with what came out of it. I think what I'm really seeing is another lane to work in. I feel like I have my more polished exhibition quality, and then I also enjoy the tabletop level. And this is a way to combine both of those in a more meaningful way. It's nice to have different styles, and this is a very stylish way to paint. And as always, you can take methods from this approach, combine it in with your own. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making it. As you can see, the gears are turning. So please feel free to let me know how you feel in the comment section down below. And until we meet again, my friends, remain unchained.